My name's Joe Woodham from Torii. Welcome to our vlog series on all things design. Today I'm joined by Redbubbles Director of Design, Emy Alegre. Emy started her career as a designer in Latin America, where she founded Rioshu, a coaching and web development consultancy focused on user-centered design. At the end of 2010, correct me if I'm wrong there, she was approached to move to the other side of the world, where she joined REA and most recently Redbubble, arguably two of Australia's most exciting and successful startups over the last couple of years. Great to see you this morning, Emy. So thanks for joining us today.
For having me.
It's been a pretty exciting ride since you've joined Australia, but you've had a pretty cool career as a designer. So we'll just kick it off there. Tell us about your experience of designing. Probably in design before design was really a thing.
Yes, it certainly wasn't a thing. And it actually started from very early in my career, because let me take you back. Well, before my design career, I had an interesting journey because back in 1988, I'll take you back in time.
Wow.
When I was 4, and my mom asked me, so what do you want to be when you're grown up? And I said, I want to be an illustrator and a millionaire. And she wisely pointed out that that was a very uncommon combination. So I started iterating ever since. And I embraced a few things. One was my love for drawing. It was a very deliberate act, because I wanted to capture what I was thinking so I could show it to others. I wasn't great with words, but I figured if I can draw it, then I can show it to you. And then we can work on, develop the concept further together. And that came very handy, as you start designing stuff, because then you can design in groups, in bigger teams. And I also got obsessed with printed material and any sort of places or things where I could find layouts and pictures and text, and I will collect them and I will cut them out and I will realign them and redesign them, because I knew it could. I had this curiosity. I wanted to see if things could be designed differently, if there was more than one way of doing things, and if they could be done better. And as I was thinking about it, and that was another thing that came very handy in the future, I also started thinking about the people who created these things, because I will think, well, look at these, characters or this set of colors or whatever that was. Someone's job is to create this thing. Like, someone's been paid to create this font, or I didn't know the word at the time, but all of these elements and the photography, and I was fascinated by it. But I was also fascinated by how I was thinking about them, and I thought, are they thinking about me as a user? And then I discovered that I could, that they were. Most of them were thinking about your users, their users, but that I discovered that you were able to do all of those things with computers. And I discovered the internet. And then about 2 decades ago, when I had to go to uni and basically decide between computer science and graphic design, those were my 2 options. I didn't like either of them. I wanted the mix of both. And like you pointed out, UX or web design, that wasn't a thing back then. I couldn't, go and learn that somewhere. So I reluctantly chose computer science, and all of my friends were designers. I was surrounded. I liked them. I liked what they were creating and talking about and all of these things. And I was frustrated because they were not helping engineers design nice things. And that's really where it all started, because I'm like, wait, there's these 2 worlds, and if they converge, that will be wonderful, wouldn't it? But I realized, by developing these friendships, I realized that it wasn't because they didn't want to. They were as frustrated as I was, but they didn't know how to, design for digital. Graphic design was very, material and printed at the time. So I decided I will learn the tools and I will certify myself. So I learned in depth all of the design tools and I started experimenting with stuff. And I got an Adobe certification. And there she is. That's my daughter. Sorry.
No, that's all right. What's her name?
Sophia.
Sophia.
Yes.
That's
Hi,
my second daughter's name.
There we go. So
Wow.
it's a great name. Yeah.
It is a great name. Have you got F or PH?
F.
With PH.
I speak Spanish,
Ah,
as you can probably tell by my exotic accent. Yeah, Sophia's a good name. You can pronounce that in English and Spanish with no problems.
Have you been teaching Sophia Spanish?
Yeah, she's fully fluent in
Spanish.
Spanish.
That's awesome.
Which is lots of fun, you can imagine.
I speak, well, I've been learning Japanese and I've been trying to teach my daughter. It's not going down well at the moment.
Yeah, you have to be, you have to have the discipline of, you have to use it every time, every day. That's tough.
It's difficult.
What's I saying? I was talking about, yes, storyline design tools, because I wanted, to converge the two worlds. And they were not, my designer friends, they were not learning design software at design schools. So I thought I can help with that. So I learned the tools and then I started teaching them. And that's how I started my consultancy with teaching the tools, really. And at the start, I was teaching designers. And that was okay, graphic designers moving into the digital space. That was okay because they were expanding their knowledge, but they were building on the stuff that they had already learned, and they had to unlearn a lot because it takes a different mindset. So it was tricky. Then I started teaching all sorts of students with different backgrounds and different ages, different fields, experience, and that's where the real magic started happening, because I really understood the power of having diversity of thought, and how you need to have it in order to form a highly high performing team. So that was a great experience. But I also developed this empathy for users, because I realized how some people were really struggling with learning the tools, and for some other people was very easy. It was the exact same tool, an interface software, but some people were adjusting to this digital world more slowly. So I started thinking about how everything we were creating at the time was, well, we had to accept the fact that there were different levels of accessibility. And accessibility in not only consuming the content, but also interacting. Like you had to be more deliberate about deciding what audience were you building for. So that was a really good lesson as well that I took with me. And I remember, just as an aside, I remember something that Johnny Ive said. I love Johnny Ive. He's one of my very inspirational leaders. And he said, when we struggle with technology, we assume the issue is with us. But if we struggle with food, or if we eat something dreadful and it doesn't taste nice, we don't assume the issue is with us. So it's interesting, isn't it? Because whenever we're interacting with something, we put it on us, but really it's, there's a lot of responsibility in how the tool or the experience was created. So then my students became people working at companies with design roles. And back then you were hearing, UX job titles. That was a more widely accepted thing. And you have to remember, this is all in Latin America. So we were a little bit behind the whole trend.
I think you're
So
actually still quite far in front of Australia at that time.
it was the internet was such a blessing, because like how do you learn? I think that's not there, and how do you teach that? And companies were reaching out to me and saying, look, this well, we have these people, this team, and can you teach them the tools, and can you help us integrating design into our practice? And I was just learning Agile, and I was learning, ways of working back then. So it was like, okay, I'll try, but I was learning with them, and I was embedded into their teams. That was the only way, really, to get to know how to do it. And I realized, well, there's many ways to do it, and it depends on the company's objectives and the stage and size and everything. But I had the opportunity to then coach, by then that would have been hundreds of designers and lots of companies setting up teams. So it was almost like a sprint. Sometimes it will take a couple of weeks, sometimes it will take months. And I got to work with companies, first initially local companies, then more regional, small, big, different industries. Pepsi, Bayer, they had like projects, they wanted to test this out, and I was part of them. Microsoft, I really started expanding my network, and it was through that network that I learned that there was this company in Australia, REA, and they wanted to do the same. They had they were working with designers, and they knew how to work with them, but they wanted to bring the team in-house, and that was the job. And I had some experience working with remote teams, but you have to remember, back then that was like through Skype, and I just horrible. Like I don't know how, very poorly, surely. But the job wasn't to be a remote job. They wanted to bring the team in-house, so I moved, and we started the team. And this is this is more than 10 years ago. So I was the first designer, full-time designer for REA, and I had a chance to help with hiring, setting processes, practices, building a few of their experiences from scratch in-house. Hired my team, my peers, my boss. So the team went from 1 to, I can't remember exactly, probably over 20 designers. And that takes a few years. And they were all designers with all types of backgrounds as well. People being very heavily oriented towards UI design, some other research background, and like a really good mix. I got to work in one of the areas there, the commercial line of business. So I was leading that space, and got to build the iOS and iPad apps for them, design strategy, and just leading that area, design for that area. And then there was an opportunity to build and establish the practice, to build a team and set a practice all over again. So I joined Redbubble with that mission of setting up design again, and here I am a few years later.
So, wow, going from running a business, working with Pepsi and Microsoft is so cool. And then how did you transition into taking a permanent job and having a boss again?
That was really hard. It was super interesting. It was a really great experience. It was something new. I had to unlearn a lot of things that I had learned by running my own business. One is that you probably know, by running your own, that you tend to work a lot more than you should. I think I was working probably like 20 hours a day. It was something ridiculous. It takes a tremendous amount of work to get your own business running. And as I was working with different companies, I always had that feeling of, I wish I could see this product all the way through release and iterations and stuff. And I didn't have the chance to do that. I really wanted to experience it. So it was either building my own product or joining a company who's had a product that I could stay with and support for a while. So that was part of my drive. But the other one was that when I got to work closely with companies, I learned so much from different people. And I initially thought I was going to stay there with REA for a year. That was the contract for 1 year. But I love the people and how smart they are and how they worked. I'm like, there's no chance I'm going to learn everything I need to learn in 1 year. I'm going to stay. So that's how I decided to stay here and sold my business, met the person who today, he's my husband. We have a family. So I'm staying. It was a good story at the end.
It's like you joined REA at like such an exciting time, and like their growth around that time, they were the place to work. I guess, how did that impact you as a designer, being able to sort of go into a business that was really trying to adopt design and then being able to, I guess, attract the best people in the market, because everyone wanted to work at REA back then because they were the tech startup.
Yes, you're right. And there were early adopters, and they were doing all of these cool things for their employees. Fantastic place to work. So that definitely helped in attracting the talent. But also, I was very comfortable talking about the practice. So I guess I was not only evangelizing but recruiting, almost like, that hard work that some designers describe as you have to sell design to an organization. And I was so used to doing that I never saw it as hard work. I'm like, well, this is where we're at. As design grows and expands, we went from, I was very aware of the evolution. We went from graphic design to something to webmasters, to web design, to UX, to product design. So I'm like, well, we just have to tell people about it because we are creating this thing. So I will talk about that and the processes and frameworks that we were developing. And that was very attractive for people because they were also looking to expand their understanding of how the field was evolving. They wanted to be a part of it. In looking back, the area that I couldn't really elaborate a lot on was all of the business side of things, all of the product development, and via really how to connect all of the work that we were doing with very high and broad business goals. But there was so much to learn with design as a practice in that area that it was one thing at a time. First, we get the team running, and then we could start thinking about how to cross that bridge. That was one of the paths the practice, one of the paths that I was using as a way to attract talent, and the other one, the business side of things, as a point of, let's work this out together. I don't know, but together as a strong team, as a more mature team, surely we can work it out, and then we can evangelize, other companies, and we can work together.
Then, I guess, going from an REA into a Redbubble, which you joined there as the first dedicated designer as well. And that was kind of when they just started growing. So I think that's kind of when they'd finally worked out how to really rapidly expand, and they were doing really well. What was it like going into, I guess, Redbubble? Because you've had the experience kind of taking REA on that journey now. Was it a lot easier to go in and sort of maybe help from a business case perspective in terms of this is how we, and this is why?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And it was super interesting because the challenge, it sounded similar. Well, we need to set up the function, get the team up and running, and integrate with or advance our ways of working and improve the experience. So the brief sounds similar, but what I didn't see, it was a great surprise, a great experience. But what I didn't see back when I joined Redbubble was that it was so early, they didn't have a product organization established. And that was one of the things that REA, of course, had. That's why they were so successful. Their product org was amazing and the people were so talented that they were driving the experience. And it was design who needed to be integrated, sort of thing. But with Redbubble, they didn't have that. They had lots of engineers. One product person who hired me, and he was like, how do we go from here? So I had to move from UX to product design. So I had to think about design from a more holistic perspective, and I was going to say forced, but not forced, but I had to embrace the challenge of, well, now you have to think about the product and the business because we need to work together here in connecting the dots. So I was happy to join a company at that stage because I was learning myself. So I got to expand my thinking. It was great. What I really enjoyed as well is that in being small, you can be so much more nimble and you can test so many other things. There's a lot less risks to consider, and it's a lot easier to be part of design from the very start of the process. So from the let's talk about the customer problem, because that's, we're going to talk about customer problems so we can set business objectives around them. And in a big organization, it's really hard to get to that level. You will have to cross many, many bridges in order to join all of the dots. So there were a few dots to join. But in being part of it, I was there when we had to add more layers and more dots in order to strengthen the strategy. And so it was not only UX, it was developing the product, ways of working, and also how are we going to contribute to the business objectives? How are we going to think about the strategy? What's the design role in setting up the strategy? And Redbubble was pretty open to get design involved in all of those.
It was, I loved working with Redbubble. I actually probably learned most of my business lessons of how to work with clients from working closely with Paul. I spent so much time in your offices, I guess, understanding the business and then how we as a business need to work with our clients. It's a cool experience, but it was really cool to watch the company grow so quickly.
Yes. Yeah. And now the practice. Now there's a strong product practice now, and now we can describe different aspects, and we have the frameworks and processes and systems to let us scale. So looking back, the journey has been quite an amazing journey. See all of the people. We're still a medium small team, I will say, but the thinking that has grown alongside the company.
Yeah, very cool. So moving on to the next question, was what inspired you to get into leadership? But was it inspiration, or was it just a natural progression of a journey of like, this is where I need to get to be able to create change? Like what moved you into leadership?
That's a really good question, because I saw it as part of the job from the start. I think if thinking back of the journey, like my whole journey, I had to be proactive in trying to join the dots between engineering and design, for example. So I felt the responsibility of, well, I can see this gap. I need to do something about it. I didn't know that at the time, that I was being a leader in that space. I was bringing people together and I was learning things so I could bring others in the journey. And that is leadership. I didn't know what I was doing, I was learning and trying things. But that's the start of it. So it was a natural part of me. And then I was actually surprised every time I hear designers going, oh, but all of the meetings and all of that, like you have to do the selling of design, and you have to get stakeholders, and I'm like, yeah, but that's how you do it, that's
the job.
Yeah, that's the job. And it was, I guess, the realization at some, I don't know when that happened, but the realization of the framing of the problem, it's more important than the solution of to the problem. So design starts from that framing of the problem. And if you want to frame that problem well, you're going to spend more time there. And if you want to do it well, you have to gain enough context. So you have to get yourself into that space where all of the leadership conversations are happening. Good design happens when you provide the team with enough context, business context, clear outcomes, goals, and then they have the space to run. But you have to be there at that level. So I knew design will happen from a very early stage or from a high level. So I knew I needed to get there in that space. I've always gravitated there. Then being able to put the systems and processes in place, that is really hard to do from your team, like working very closely to delivery. Say, for example, if you wanted to get, if you think practically about discovery and delivery, the two processes, the two main phases, if you were a designer contributing to the delivery side of things, and you knew design was more valuable at the earlier stage of the process as you're framing the problem, having that change from there, it's really hard. You have to influence so many people to change or evolve their ways of working, to change things. So I knew that to have bigger impact, I needed to have different conversations about design, but different levels.
Yep. So it's a good way of framing it, because I think a lot of designers love the hands-on design side of it, but that strategy piece and the stakeholder management and actually taking people on that journey from the start is such an important piece in the puzzle. And like, especially when we get into sort of corporate design, it's a lot of the job is managing stakeholders. So you have to really understand that as a piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, and super interesting, because more than sharing what you think, which is probably interesting, it's more the getting them to see what you see, so you can both have a conversation. That it's not the purely evangelizing as, I'm telling you what good design is let's frame this problem together. So together we can see that this is actually a customer problem, and we will, if we frame it better, we can get to deliver value better, and it's going to be more viable for the business, so we can achieve both goals. It's not throwing more design at problems. It's usually asking better questions, and you have to get them on board with, or you need their help, really. It's not only I'll get you to tell me the thing that I already know. No one knows. We have to get there together. So yeah, it's a different way of seeing things.
Yeah, very cool. So next question. I guess in your journey as a design leader, is there any one piece of advice that you've been given along that journey that's kind of stuck in the back of your mind, that's helped shape your career as a design leader and helping set up practices?
There's a few. Yes, that's the answer is yes. One very remarkable piece of advice is how flexible your mindset has to be. And what I mean, let me elaborate. What I mean by that is not only being open to new ideas or collaboration or being curious, but you have to develop at least two strong mindsets. One around curiosity and openness. And you have to do it as a deliberate choice with your team in order to assess different solutions, or even to frame different problems or ask better questions. You have to be open to consider many options. So that takes a lot of effort, because we're always biased and we always lean towards familiar things, or things that are easy to quantify or to describe. But that's not often the most important thing. So you have to have that openness. But curiosity is not enough. You also have, because you never will deliver anything if you stay in that open, curious mindset. You have to also switch to the convergent sort of mindset of saying, okay, so that's the idea. So to get there, what thing are we building to get us to push us forward? And that is the complete opposite mindset, because then you have to go, okay, constraints and deliver, and you have to not so much stop being open, but get into the mindset of let's get it done. And it takes a more narrow, a more focused sort of approach. So being able to go from one to the other is extremely valuable, because you get to understand, well, I have to open, but I also have to deliver stuff, and I have to deliver value, that incremental delivery. And being open, it's very demanding, to switch from one to the other. Most of the time, you do it many times in a leadership position. You have to do it many times a day, because with very senior stakeholders, you are talking about metrics and things you're going to move, and very specific things that are easily, sometimes not as easily, but that are quantifiable. And with your team, you're thinking and you're having conversations that sometimes are very aspirational and visionary. We could do all of these things, but remember, we could do all of these things, and they need to align to this higher goal. So it's that flexibility in mindset. It's never one or the other. You have to be able to jump from one to the other. For different types of designer, though, and I should make this I should clarify this part. It's going to look different for different types of designers. For individual contributors, you can imagine that being going from the craft and creating, very high quality things as an expert in your vertical, to thinking about the systems that you need. So you're going to go from very systematic to let's look at the quality of this thing. For people leaders, it's going to look more horizontal, because they have to then go, well, I have this experience over here and this experience over there, and how are they going to integrate as a thing, as a one thing? And with your teams, you have to be able to refer to the other things, but remember, they are only working on this area. If you bring too many elements from other teams, or if you bombard it with a very broad context, they will get lost.
Yeah.
So we all, at some point in our careers, we all have to, that's what I think we call seniority, that ability to jump from the space that you're working to different areas.
It's a hard skill to develop over time, prioritizing where you actually spend your time and where it's most important.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you have to practice. No one can teach you that. You have to solve different problems and slowly get to expand.
Do you think having the right type of people around you that you really can trust and give certain tasks actually enables you as a leader to really focus and spend your time in the right areas to get the best out of both your team and what you're trying to achieve?
100%. I couldn't tell you how talented my team is, and they have different skills. There's one particular person that I'm thinking of. He's a leader in REA. He's an individual contributor. He is just so fantastic at the craft. His eye for quality, good design. He knows what good design is, and anything he creates, it's just everything. It's just so beautiful. And if I didn't have people like him looking after the quality at that level, I will have to spend a lot of time in doing that. Having talented people is fundamental, and you have to trust them. I know, for example, that with this person, I can completely trust them and go, you can assess the quality and consistency and all of the aspects that matter. I know, and we worked together long enough to be able to, have that sort of relationship. But absolutely, yes, you have to surround yourself with, I was going to say smarter people, but we're all smart in different ways. So different types of smartness, if that makes sense.
That's probably a good way of putting it, because everyone always says surround yourself with smarter people, but like for me in building a team, I need people that are smarter in different areas. So yes, they are smarter at something different, and everyone, I guess, everyone makes each other shine by adding those extra skills to that team.
Yes.
Like diversity of mind as opposed
Yes.
to skills. That actually leads into the next question, which is what do you actually think? What's a skill or an attribute that makes a really good designer? Like, is it how they think, how they approach? Is it eye for detail? What actually makes a really good designer?
Mm. The if you think about, let me get meta for 1 second. If you think about what design is, um, design is one of my favorite definitions. Is design is the rendering of intent. So if you think about the rendered intent for some things, as in the thing that you see, the layout, the design that you can create in Figma, whatever, like that thing that we sometimes call design, that takes a different skill set in order to set something that's desirable, good to use, beautiful to look at, beautiful experience, that delight that we often refer to. That takes a certain skill set, and you have to have a lot of empathy for your user, and you have to really understand the need. Those are, if you can put yourself in the shoes of your user, you are halfway there. But then the how you render that intention, the skills that you need in order to think through the problem, that's a completely different skill set. So it depends what sort of design you refer to, or what sort of designer you want to be. But for one, you need to be very thoughtful about the problem you are solving for your users, and for the other one, you need to be very thoughtful about how you're framing the problem, and if you have the right skills in order to execute on that problem. So you have to think about the foundations and the systems. Well, do you have the technology to get there? So that takes a very expansive sort of mindset. For the other one here, you have to remember your users are interacting with hundreds, probably thousands of brands and products in one day. And your experience, it's only one of many, and it is competing and interacting with many others. So it's not about for this sort of design. It's not about the beautiful thing. It's about thinking about the network of things that are interacting with each other. Thinking that the quality is important, but how you deliver that product is just as important. It's very hard to find, but maybe not as hard, but it's very, very hard to find bad products these days. Like the quality of products, it's very hard to buy a very bad car or a computer or a cell phone. Quality, like technology has allowed us to level up the quality. So the crafting part of the design, that's sort of sorted for us, that we can leverage the tools. For the other one, thinking about you deliver that product service of experience and the competing landscape. I think that's the skill for all this sort of design. If you can combine the two, then you'll be a great leader for any company.
Yeah, very cool. This last question: what trends do you see emerging in the design space? I guess you've seen design. You've been in design a long time, so you've probably seen businesses actually adapt design. And I'd hope to think that it's easier for you to get your job done now than it was 10 years ago. Is there any trends that you see, even from a business standpoint, with how they're using design? How it's making your job easier?
Yes, there's a few things. One is that these days you don't. The design is it. is better understood, and people know, companies know that they need to embrace design from a design-centric approach from very early in the process. That is not even a trend. That these days, that is a fact. Like it's very easy to have a design conversation, or talk about customer centricity with anyone in the business almost. The other thing I've seen is that it's we are just getting better at adopting new things and leverage other tools. And I'll give you a practical example so it's not as abstract. For all of the e-commerce websites and experiences out there, if every single one of them will set themselves to create a better checkout experience, they will deviate from expanding or really developing their value proposition. It's distracting. Like, surely that's a problem to be solved. There's other companies solving just that problem, and we have probably solved most of the problem. There's definitely better ways to solve some parts of the problem, but there are companies that their value prop is to solve that problem, so you can concentrate on your own. Back in the day, you remember, we will design and redesign the sign up flow and the login something and the form to create we don't have to do all of that. So the adoption of things, of other things, not only, like when we started adopting design systems and more systematic ways of doing things, that was a win. But now it's taking it one step further and saying, sure, I'm going to integrate all of these experiences that work well for my business or whatever organization you have that work well for this experience, without feeling like, oh, are you going to use the out of the box experience? No, I'm going to leverage what's been sold. We're a lot more open to that now.
So do you spend time almost shopping around for good experiences to be able to take back and implement into the workplace? Like if you go through a really good sign-up process and go, something that we can use, why reinvent the wheel? Just borrow.
I have an endless list of things just like that. Look, they're doing that already. Can we just use the thing or adopt or whatever? There's certainly, and again, you have to have the open mindset to go. They're doing a better job than us. let's leverage it.
That's the perfect example. It's like if they're spending all of their time trying to solve a problem that's, I guess, their bottleneck in their business, and they do it incredibly well. They've just spent all of that time solving your problem for you. Why not borrow it?
Yes, absolutely. I will tell you though, the challenge with that is that now I'm thinking about my team, my design team. When you assess all of these different tools and systems you can use, there's often the one or two comments around, but we are designing this thing, and I used to own this area. So what do you mean we're just going to replace the area that we were redesigning with this other thing? So you have to also, as a design leader, you have to take your team on that journey of understanding the value you are creating. The value you're creating is not so much in, let's take the sign-up flow, in redesigning the sign-up flow, but it's probably something around better communicating value propositions so users want to sign up on the first place. That's a different problem, and that's a much more interesting problem.
Yeah. Have you ever had on that, I guess a designer creating something, and obviously they feel, I guess, responsible for bringing that design into, I guess, production. But then if you're in a company like Redbubble or REA that moves really quickly, that might change in 3 months' time. How do you take them on that journey? Like, this is like, it's always going to change. Like, we need to adapt quickly. Although you've spent a lot of time and you've created something amazing that worked 3 months ago, we now need to shift, change, and redo.
Yes, and you're right. It's happening so quickly now. That iteration of, well, now this thing that we created, it's obsolete already. It's only a few years, months, since we did it. Yeah, you're right. That is very challenging, and I learned that the hard way, I guess, because as I saw a lot of the projects that I designed and I was part of just being too old. People wouldn't use them, or they wouldn't install the app anymore, or some people will retire the app or experience altogether because we have moved on.
Yeah.
I grieved, I guess, a lot of this, like, oh, but why? And it was very helpful to hear John Mehta. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name correctly. Another design leader, and he talks about the different types of design there is as well. He talks about how you have, I think he calls it computational design, the sort of design where we create things and iterate, and it's always changing. The experience design, if you will. Then he talks about the artistic design, as in the creative process of, I'm looking at the painting you have there on the background, the beautiful paint, that you create that, and it's an expression of many things, and you hang it there and you won't iterate on it. Like, that's it. It stays. It's printed or painted or whatever that is. And then he also talks about design thinking as a different thing. So he in this talk where I had this many years ago, he talks about how you have to understand what sort of design you are doing. It's not going to be the design product design work we're doing is not the creative artistic design that you make and you hang, you print, or it's done. It will never be done. So this thing that you are creating, don't hold on to it. Not good.
Yeah. Like, do you when you bring on designers, can you see sometimes you need to take them on that journey at the start before they start, like, I don't know, building any products, just so they're aware that something that you create right now, it will change quickly.
Yes. I actually have this question as part of the interviewing process because it's a really hard thing to develop. And although it can be developed, and I have coached designers to develop it, it takes time. It takes a willingness. You have to at least be, what's the word? Consciously incompetent about it. But you have to know you need to develop it, at least. So what part of the questions as part of the design process and the first few interactions I have with designers are things like, so tell me about a project or a thing you have built recently, and what's your role? It's really hard to get to because now everything's we as a team. So you yourself, what did you contribute to this thing that we're looking at? And then I follow up with, and what were the things that you had to let go in order for this contribution to stay? Because surely there were a few things you explored. And you can tell by I really wanted to do this thing and I couldn't. And sometimes the frustration is real because they were, and this is what I look for. They were looking to create more value for users. But sometimes but I really liked what I did and I couldn't, make it happen. That's not a good sign because, that's I can't find the word for it, but it's hard for them to let go then. And it will be very hard to move fast.
Do you find the longer that someone's actually been doing any job, so let's say a senior designer, they're more sometimes stuck in their way, so it's harder to get them to think that way and approach it like you can adapt, let go?
Yes, I have a few practices to work on that, because you're right. It gets harder the longer you've been doing something. So I have in place a rotation program where usually you hire for a team or for a specific problem you're trying to solve, and you try to find that match of skills and interests of the candidate and the team. But I like hiring a little bit more broadly. I like to think about the maturity and thinking. That's sort of the broad skill set, more than I'm hiring for growth and acquisition. Just to give you an example, it's more like I'm hiring to develop this level of abstract, work on this level of abstract problem. And the rotation program that I'm referring to is, well, you're going to solve, say, very well defined problems with this team, and once you can design for defined problems, I'll move you to another space where you can design for undefined problems. So you have to define the problem as well and the solution. And then I'll move you to another space where the space is undefined. So you have to help defining it. And then I'll move you to another space where the strategy is undefined. And that's how you start working with more uncertainty at different levels until you go, what are we doing at the highest level? That's where like everything's up, and you have to, shape everything. But I rotate people, and I don't have a set amount of time, but it has to be at least a quarter solving one type of problem. Also, you don't want to cause a lot of disruption in teams. And people want to form good bonds and everything. Sometimes the teams, the problems evolve, so someone can stay in a team for years because the problem has been evolving and they're working at a different thing. But that's how I keep the problem shifting, so they don't get attached to, but this is my space and this is how I solve problems, because that's not helpful for their careers or their thinking or the company.
Interesting. It's an interesting way of thinking, because like everyone wants to solve the problem. Like that's how you get your sense of worth, I guess, by solving a problem. But like if the problem is changing, how do you get that, I guess, sense of worth at the end of the day, going, I solved that problem, or I was a part of the team that worked on that problem?
Yes, that's a good point. Yeah, like the rotation or your stay with that team ends with, you did, achieved what you were looking for. It's your time to graduate and move to the next level. But yeah, you have to have that sense of you delivered the value you were after. Otherwise it will get like, oh, come on, you keep moving the goalpost. It's a two-sided sort of agreement where, well, you want to grow in this space, this is the next opportunity. It's a different problem. You have to learn to work with different things. Yeah, I want to work with different things.
Yeah. Well, that was absolutely amazing, Emy. I really appreciate your time. I've learned a lot. It's great to understand a bit more about you and your experience doing some cool things over the years. It's a very, very cool journey. So I appreciate you taking the time to share it with us.
Thank you. My pleasure. Time. Wow. We covered a lot. I just looked at the time. Thank you so much. It was such an enjoyable conversation.
It was. Thank you. I love doing this just because I get to understand more about design, but great design leadership. I think it's cool. I guess having to understand how you approach things and your thought process behind it. It's really, really inspiring.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Always a pleasure to talk to you.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Amy. I'll let you back to the day, but thank you very much.